In the summer of 1947, a British lawyer who had never set foot in India sat down at a desk in London. He was 48 years old. His name was Cyril Radcliffe. He specialized in property law, boundary disputes between neighbors, garden walls, that kind of thing. And he had just been handed a job: draw a single line across a map of India. One line that would create 2 new countries. He asked how long he had. They told him, 5 weeks. He took the job. He drew the line. And then he went home and never came back. That line split a subcontinent, displaced 14 million people, and killed somewhere between 1 and 2 million. No one knows the real number because no one bothered to count. The line he drew in 5 weeks with bad maps in a hot room in Delhi, it's still there. Barbed wire, watchtowers, soldiers staring at soldiers, and almost nobody knows his name. Cyril Radcliffe was, by all accounts, a good lawyer, thorough, precise, the kind of man who reads every footnote. He'd never held public office, never negotiated a treaty. He had no expertise in India, not its history, not its religions, not its languages. He couldn't have told you the difference between a Sikh and a Muslim and a Hindu. And here's the part that sounds like a joke but isn't. This was exactly why they picked him. The British government needed someone who couldn't possibly be biased. Their logic was simple, and in a very British way, completely insane. If Radcliffe knew nothing about India, he couldn't favor one side over the other. So they plucked him from his law chambers in London, put him on a plane, and told him to redraw the lives of 400 million people. He arrived in Delhi on July 8, 1947. The deadline, August 15th. Independence Day. 38 days. He was given 2 teams to advise him. One represented the Muslim League. They wanted Pakistan. One represented the Indian National Congress. They wanted a united India, and failing that, as much land as possible. The 2 teams agreed on exactly nothing. And the maps they handed him? Some were from the 1920s. Census data was guesswork. Religious demographics were essentially, we think this district is mostly Muslim, but we're not sure. Radcliffe, the footnote-reading lawyer, was being asked to draw the most consequential border of the 20th century, with data that wouldn't hold up in a property dispute over a garden wall. The Punjab was the hardest problem. It always is, in partition stories. 5 rivers, 3 religions, millions of people living in the same cities, the same villages, sometimes the same streets. There was no clean line. Every possible border would leave large populations of Muslims on the Indian side and large populations of Hindus and Sikhs on the Pakistani side. Radcliffe knew this. His advisors knew this. Nobody had a solution, because there wasn't one. Here's a detail that tells you everything about how this was done. Lahore and Amritsar, 2 of the most important cities in the Punjab, are 30 miles apart. 30 miles. Less than an hour's drive. One was predominantly Muslim, the other had a large Sikh and Hindu population. But the surrounding districts were mixed. Radcliffe had to pick. Which city goes to India? Which to Pakistan? He studied the maps. He listened to both teams argue. And then, because the deadline was 2 days away, he just drew the line. But here's what makes this story go from tragedy to catastrophe. Radcliffe finished the line days before the deadline. The British had it in their possession, and they sat on it. They deliberately delayed announcing the border until August 17th, 2 days after independence. On August 15th, 1947, India and Pakistan celebrated their independence. 2 new nations, freedom from empire, the end of colonial rule. It was euphoria. And then, on August 17th, the Radcliffe line was published. Millions of people woke up that morning and discovered something horrifying. They were now living in the wrong country. Their home, the home their family had lived in for generations, was suddenly on the other side of an international border. A border drawn by a man they had never heard of, who was already packing his bags to go back to London. The British later claimed the delay was administrative. They needed time to print the maps, to finalize the paperwork. Let me read you what the official historian of the partition later wrote. Quote, "The delay was not accidental. The British did not want to be held responsible for the violence they knew was coming." End quote. They knew the line would trigger chaos. And they waited until the flags were raised and the celebrations were over before they told anyone where the line actually was. What happened next was the largest mass migration in human history. 14 million people, 14 million, left their homes and crossed the new border. On foot, in carts, on the roofs of trains, columns of refugees stretched for 50 miles. If you had been standing on a hill in the Punjab in September 1947, you would have seen an unbroken river of people moving in both directions. Muslims going west into the new Pakistan, Hindus and Sikhs going east into the new India. And as they moved, the violence started. Organized massacres, rioting, armed groups intercepting refugee columns, trains arriving at stations with every single passenger dead, kidnappings, tens of thousands of women and children taken, never to return. Neighbors who had lived next to each other for generations turned on each other overnight. The official death toll passed 1 million within 6 months. Historians now estimate it was closer to 2 million. 2 million people killed by the drawing of a line. And Cyril Radcliffe? He had already gone home. He left India before the worst of the violence even began. He was paid 40,000 rupees for his 5 weeks of work, a fortune at the time, equivalent to roughly $4 million today. Before he left, he destroyed all his papers and maps. Every note, every draft. He didn't want a record of what he had done. He never spoke publicly about the partition for the rest of his life. Decades later, a journalist finally got Radcliffe to talk. He was an old man by then. The interview didn't last long, but he said one thing that has echoed through history. Quote, "I suspect they handed me the job because they wanted someone to blame." End quote. He was right. The British government needed a fall guy, someone who wasn't a politician, someone who could absorb the outrage. Radcliffe was perfect. He took the job. He drew the line. He took the blame. And the men who made the decision to partition India? They wrote their memoirs, accepted their knighthoods, and moved on. That line, drawn by one man in 5 weeks with incomplete maps and conflicting advice, is now one of the most heavily militarized borders in the world. 3 wars have been fought over it. Both countries have nuclear weapons pointed at each other across it. The villages that were cut in half in 1947 are still cut in half. Families that were separated that summer have never been reunited. And here's the thing. There's nothing unique about the Radcliffe line. Borders all over the world were drawn the same way, by people who had never seen the land, in rooms thousands of miles away, with bad maps and worse intentions. The Durand Line, Sykes-Picot, the Berlin Conference lines that carved up Africa. Every single one of these borders has a body count. Because borders aren't just lines on a map. They're walls through people's lives. The red line fades. The map remains. If you want to understand how the world actually works, the borders, the systems, the stories they don't teach in school, subscribe to Behind the Frames. There's a new map and a new story every week.